My husband vanished on a Wednesday. No note, no calls, no signs of struggle, just a cup of cold tea on the counter and his brown cardigan missing from the hook by the door. At first, I panicked like any wife would. I paced the living room. I dialed his phone a dozen times. I even walked the quiet streets of Maple Pines hoping I'd find him chatting with a neighbor or wandering in one of his absent-minded daydreams. But when dusk fell and he still hadn't returned, the dread settled in my bones. Something wasn't right. The police station smelled like wet paper and indifference. I told the officer on duty that my husband, Roger Sterling, had disappeared. I gave him our address, our wedding date, July 18th, 1991, and even his social security number, which I still remembered from filing our taxes. He typed for a while, then stopped. His face changed. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "we don't have any record of a Roger Sterling at that address." I blinked. What? No property in that name. No marriage license. No phone number registered to him. And your ID. I handed him my worn-out driver's license. He frowned. This was flagged as invalid 3 months ago. That's ridiculous. I renewed it just last year. I snapped, voice cracking. He called someone in the back. More typing. More looks. "Ma'am, according to our system, there's no record of an Elise Sterling living in this state. You're not in any of our databases." My chest tightened. "What are you saying?" He leaned in gently. "Are you sure? You're not confused? That you and Mr. Sterling were actually married?" I don't remember how I got home. I only remember the cold. And how the key I'd used for 32 years no longer fit in the lock. I stood on the porch, soaked in rain, staring at a yellow eviction notice with a name I didn't recognize, Marion Eckhart. My wedding ring felt too heavy on my finger. I banged on the door until the porch light across the street flicked on. A stranger peeked through her blinds. This was my home, my life, my name, and suddenly, I was no one. The next morning, I broke into the house through the kitchen window, same one Roger once scolded me for forgetting to lock. Everything was changed. No wedding photos. No old books. My clothes, thrown in black trash bags like I'd never mattered. I ran upstairs, searching for proof, anything. In the attic, behind a stack of dusty boxes, I found a metal shoebox. On the lid, written in black marker, was a single word: silence. Inside were photos of me, younger, smiling. But my face was scratched out with red ink in every single one. Below that, a forged birth certificate, not in my name. Medical files I'd never seen, stating I suffered from delusional identity disorder. A letter, unsigned, patient continues to fabricate false identities, including fictitious marriage. None of it real, but all of it convincing enough to ruin me. That night, in a motel room that smelled like mildew and loneliness, I sat on the floor and wept. Not because Roger had left me, but because he had slowly, quietly erased me while living beside me for 32 years. And I never saw it coming. But now, I would. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay on the motel's itchy bedspread, staring at the ceiling, holding one of the scratched-up photographs in my hand. My own smile, disfigured by a blade and ink. Who does that to someone they love? Who lives beside a woman for 32 years only to erase her piece by piece? By sunrise, the numbness gave way to something sharper: resolve. I began digging. First into my own past. Or what was left of it. My name, Elise Margaret Sterling, no longer existed in any state database. Social Security? Erased. Marriage license? Gone. Hospital records? Wiped clean. Even my birth certificate showed the name Elaine Maris, not Elise. I'd never even heard that name before. Roger hadn't vanished. He had planned this. And I had no one left who would even remember me. My parents died 10 years ago. We never had children. My old friends from college had long drifted away, and any neighbor who might have vouched for me had either moved or been replaced by new strangers. All part of his long game. But then I remembered someone. His mother, Evelyn Sterling. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. Roger said she'd moved to a care facility in another state. Said her memory was going. I had believed him. That was my first mistake. It took 3 days to find her. The fifth call I made finally led me to a nurse at Silver Pines Assisted Living in Rockford, Illinois. They still had an Evelyn Sterling, aged 89. "She's not well," the nurse said gently. "Mostly sedated. But she's alive." I scraped together what little money I had, borrowed a coat from a church shelter, and boarded the cheapest bus I could find. It was a 14-hour ride through snow, silence, and every bad memory I tried not to have. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the letter I'd found in that shoebox. "Patient continues to fabricate false identities." Over and over. He was turning me into a madwoman on paper. But I was not crazy. I was erased. Silver Pines stood like a tombstone at the edge of the woods. Clean, sterile, too white. I walked in through the front doors with a racing heart and asked for Evelyn Sterling. "Room 206, the nurse whispered. "She doesn't get visitors anymore." I climbed the stairs slowly, afraid she wouldn't remember me. Or worse, afraid she would. That she helped him do this. Her room smelled of lavender and old wood. She was lying in bed, frail and sunken, her white hair in gentle curls. The TV played quietly in the background, a news anchor mouthing silent headlines. "Evelyn," I whispered. She turned her head. Her eyes blinked. Once, twice, then widened. "Elise," she said, voice dry as paper. I swallowed hard. "Yes." Tears welled in her eyes. "He said you were dead." "I might as well have been," I said, sitting at the edge of her bed. "Roger, he's gone. He erased me. I don't exist anymore." Her lips trembled. Her frail hand reached for mine. I knew what he was doing. I begged him to stop. But I was just the old mother. A burden. "You knew." She nodded weakly. "I didn't know how far he'd go. But I kept something. I couldn't live with what he did. I kept it in the box." "What box?" I whispered. She pointed toward the closet. Inside, buried beneath a stack of blankets and forgotten linens, I found a small biscuit tin. Inside were 3 things: our original marriage license, a photo of me and Roger at Niagara Falls, wedding rings visible, and a handwritten confession from Roger Sterling, dated 4 years ago. I began fabricating her mental illness in 2006. Every year, I erased a little more. Her bank records, her ID, her past. She never noticed. No one would believe a woman who doesn't legally exist. By the time I leave, she won't be a person anymore. And no one will care. I stared at the paper. My hands trembled. Evelyn was crying softly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have stopped him. I should have done something when I still had strength." "You did something," I whispered, gripping the letter. "You kept this. And now I can make it count." That night, I made a copy of every document and mailed them to 3 places: a law firm, a journalist I remembered from a local exposed show, and the courthouse in Maple Pines. Roger had planned to erase me quietly. But now, I was going to haunt him loudly. I mailed those copies with trembling hands, sealing each envelope like a quiet weapon. It wasn't enough to expose him. I needed the world to see him. To understand what kind of man smiles at you every morning while slowly making you disappear. Back in Maple Pines, I couldn't return to the house, not legally. It was no longer mine. But I had one last place to turn. An old friend of Roger's from his days in real estate, Darren Miles. He always liked me more than he let on. When I told him everything, I expected disbelief. Maybe pity. But all I got was a low whistle and a sharp nod. That explains why he suddenly disappeared from every investment deal we were working on. Took all his money and ghosted. "You knew he was leaving?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. But I did know this. Roger Sterling doesn't exist anymore." That's when Darren pulled out his laptop and showed me something I wasn't ready to see. Roger Sterling had vanished, but Jonathan Eckhart was very much alive. A LinkedIn profile. A portfolio website. Photos of him smiling on yachts with slick hair and a younger, model-thin woman beside him. Her name was Camilla Hart. Age 29. Labeled as his life partner and CEO of a wellness brand for grieving widows. I nearly gagged. Jonathan Eckhart now lived in Florida, in a gated estate on Palm River. He had investments in crypto, tech startups, and ran some vague, holistic grief healing foundation. The man who erased me was now pretending to help women recover from loss. He was profiting from pain. Darren looked at me cautious. You can't go straight to the cops. Not yet. The documents Evelyn gave you are enough to raise suspicion, but he's covered his tracks well. You'll need someone who can make noise. I didn't respond. I was staring at the woman beside him, Camila. Her smile was sharp, her eyes cold. She looked like someone who liked secrets. I wondered if she knew. Or worse, if she helped. I know someone, Darren said finally. A journalist. She investigates fraud. She owes me a favor. That's how I met Riley. Riley Monroe was young, blunt, and sharp as a razor. She wore combat boots and carried her notepad like a weapon. When I met her in a rundown diner off the highway, she didn't bother with small talk. Okay, she said, flipping open her journal. You're telling me your husband faked a new life, erased your existence, and is now running a widow-centric foundation? Yes. And you have proof? I slid the copies across the table. She flipped through them in silence. Then her eyes paused on the handwritten confession. Jesus Christ, she muttered. This man's a ghostwriter's dream villain. I want justice, I whispered. Riley closed the folder and met my eyes. No, you want vengeance. And I'm the right person to help you get it. But first, we do this smart. Strategic. No cops yet. We expose him in the court of public opinion before we drag him to the real one. How? She smirked. You let me infiltrate him. His little grieving widow foundation. I've played that role before. You think he won't recognize the risk? Men like him, she said. They never suspect a woman who walks in smiling. That night, we began planning it all, like a heist. Only we weren't stealing anything. We were taking back what was already mine. But something else happened that night. Something I didn't expect. Riley leaned in close and said, You know, there's one thing we need to consider. What's that? If he erased you, who else did he erase? I froze. What if I wasn't the first? What if I wasn't the only woman he buried without a grave? Suddenly, the rabbit hole widened. And at the bottom, I saw more than my own pain, I saw others. Nameless. Voiceless. Gone. But I was still here. And I would bring them all back with me. Riley didn't waste time. Within 2 days, she had a new identity, a fresh wardrobe of modest pastels, and a fabricated story about losing her fiancé in a boating accident. The Grieving Widow Foundation, called Silver Light Collective, welcomed her with open arms. They didn't ask for proof. Just pain. That's how they trap you. Through Riley's eyes, I began to see the monster Roger had become, or Jonathan, as the world now knew him. He was charming in public, a healer of emotional wounds. He offered retreats, grief circles, and mentorships for wealthy widows struggling to move on. But beneath the surface, it was a machine designed to exploit vulnerability. Everything's about control, Riley whispered over the phone late one night. He surrounds himself with women who've lost everything. Then he remakes them in his image. Gives them new names, new purpose. They practically worship him. It chilled me. Because that was exactly what he did to me, only slower. Only quieter. And then Riley said something I wasn't ready for. There are files, Elise. Hidden in his office. Names. Pictures. Dossiers on other women, just like you. One of them, she's listed as terminated. Her name was Anna Leclerc. Another, Catherine Dunlow, is marked committed. But there's no facility listed. My blood went cold. He hadn't just erased me. He had erased others. Repeatedly. Women with histories. Women with families. And not just by forging documents, by rewriting their lives and making them disappear. Do you think Catherine's still alive? I asked, barely breathing. Riley was quiet for a moment. If she is, she's in hiding. Or imprisoned. Somewhere he thinks no one will ever find her. And, just like that, my mission changed. This wasn't just about exposing him anymore. This was about finding the women he buried in silence. We spent the next week tracing the limited information Riley smuggled out of his files. Anna Leclerc's name led to a death certificate filed in 2004 in Vermont, but the hospital listed on the form had burned down in 2001. Fraudulent. A lie. Anna had no grave. No obituary. Just a quiet ending no one questioned. Catherine Dunlow's trail was colder, but one note Riley copied from a folder caught my eye. Transit date, March 17th. Hold indefinite. Contact AG 9 only. AG 9. I asked aloud. What is that, some kind of code? I think it's a location, Riley murmured. Someplace underground. Off record. Private care? Private care. That hit me like a punch in the ribs. Back when Roger and I were newly married, I remembered him talking about a friend who ran an experimental care facility for high-profile clients who needed privacy. I'd laughed it off, thinking it was some elite spa. But now it came rushing back like a flood. He used to joke, if I ever go mad, that's where I want to disappear. And now he was sending women there. Do you remember the name? Riley asked. I closed my eyes, searched for it in the dustiest corners of my memory. Then it came, faint but clear, Granite Hollow. Riley gasped. I've heard of that. But it's supposed to be a myth. No paperwork. No address. Just rumors among high-end lawyers and washed-up doctors. We were chasing a ghost, but this ghost had walls, patience, and maybe even Catherine. That night, I sat alone in a tiny rented room, staring at the forged death certificate of Anna Leclerc. I imagined her face, her voice, her fear. I thought of the women at Roger's retreat, kneeling at his feet, not realizing they were offering their hearts to a man who would vanish them the moment they stepped out of line. I saw myself. I saw all of us. Forgotten. Buried. Blamed. But that was the difference now. I was still alive. And I would speak for the women who couldn't. In the weeks that followed, Riley continued playing her part inside the collective, earning Camila's trust, unlocking room after room in their sleek Florida mansion. Then, one night, she called me, her voice shaky. Elise, I found something. In a sealed drawer in Camila's room. It's a keycard and a photo of a woman strapped to a hospital bed. My blood ran cold. Who? Riley whispered. It's labeled Catherine D. We had proof. Now we just needed to find where she was. The photo Riley found haunted me. A woman, eyes wide in fear, arms strapped to a bed, her name barely scrawled in the corner, Catherine D. Her face was pale, her hair brittle and wild, but there was a quiet defiance in her gaze, even behind the restraints. She was alive. I stared at her photo until sunrise. My hands trembled, not just from fear, but from fury. Catherine wasn't dead. She wasn't crazy. She was hidden. And Roger had put her there. Or rather, Jonathan Eckhart had. Granite Hollow. It sounded like a retreat center carved into some peaceful mountain. But every whisper Riley tracked down painted it as something darker, an off-the-books psychiatric restoration center used by wealthy families to lock away inconvenient women. High-discretion mental stabilization, they called it. A prison for the inconvenient. We found a former nurse who worked there. Riley tracked her down on a private Facebook group. Her name was Marta, and she agreed to meet us at a cafe outside Charleston, South Carolina. She looked tired and scared, her eyes darting with every clink of a teacup behind the counter. I only worked there 2 months, she said, but it was enough to know I'd made a mistake. The place was underground. Like, literally underground. You couldn't even get in without a keycard and a retina scan. They said it was for confidentiality, but the women, they weren't patients. They were prisoners. She pulled something from her purse, an old ID badge. They made us sign NDAs. I could get sued for even talking to you. I leaned forward. We're not reporters. We're trying to save someone. Catherine Dunlow. She's there. Marta stiffened. Room 8. 3rd level. She came in screaming, begging someone to call her sister. But they took her phone. Said she had delusions about being married to a man named Sterling. My heart dropped. Roger had done it to her too. The exact same way. Marta hesitated, then whispered, if you really want to get in, they do intake appointments once a month. You'd need a referral and a patient. A patient? I asked. She glanced at me. Someone to commit. It's the only way in. I felt Riley's eyes on me. No, I said instantly. No way. I'm not going to pretend to be Elise. Riley cut in softly. You're the only person Roger wouldn't suspect. I laughed bitterly. Of course, I'm the one who fits the role. The erased wife. The mentally unstable ghost. It was perfect. It was poetic. It was terrifying. The following week was a blur of forged paperwork, hacked referrals, and stolen credentials. Riley worked with Darren to fabricate a new identity for me, Elaine Maris, the very name Roger had used in the forged files. We leaned into his lie, used it against him. Elaine Maris believes she's someone named Elise Sterling, the paperwork read. Shows delusional fixation on former partner. Requires secured environment. I felt sick signing it. But I had to become the woman he invented to destroy me. Only then could I walk through the doors of Granite Hollow. When the black car arrived, I was dressed in beige, no jewelry, no makeup, no trace of the woman I had once been. Riley stood outside pretending to be my niece, her eyes glassy. You'll be in and out within 48 hours, she whispered. Once I locate the server inside, I can download patient records and you'll find Catherine. I nodded. I didn't trust the trembling in my hands. I shoved them into my coat pockets to hide them. But inside, I was burning. Because once I stepped into that place, I wouldn't just be pretending to be crazy. To them, I would be crazy. Unless I could find Catherine, survive the lie, and walk out with her. The gates of Granite Hollow loomed tall and gray. Steel. Cameras on every corner. The car buzzed me in. A man in white met me at the entrance with a clipboard and no smile. Elaine Maris? Yes, I whispered, trying to sound smaller than I felt. This way. The doors closed behind me with a mechanical hiss. No cell signal. No clocks. Just silence. And the knowledge that I had 48 hours before Elise Sterling vanished forever. They stripped me of everything the moment I entered Granite Hollow. No shoes with laces. No belt. No underwire in my bra. I was given a gray cotton gown and a toothbrush with no sharp edges. A nurse named Colleen asked me if I knew the day, the year, my name. I told her I was Elise Sterling. She looked down at her clipboard. No, your name is Elaine Maris, and you've been experiencing identity delusions. The words felt like acid down my throat. I played along. Right, I said quietly. Sometimes I get confused. Good girl, she smiled. Admitting the problem is the first step to healing. But I wasn't here to heal. I was here to find her. Granite Hollow was colder than I expected. The fluorescent lights never flickered, and there were no windows. The halls stretched endlessly in shades of gray, with occasional flashes of lavender to make it feel calming. It wasn't. It felt like death. Sanitized and elegant. They gave me a bed in a room with a woman who didn't speak, just stared at her hands, muttering numbers under her breath. I asked what floor we were on. Second, she mumbled. Catherine's down. I froze. You know her? She slowly turned toward me, voice low. Room 8. Third floor. But she's not really here. They keep her behind the steel door. You need a code. Do you know it? She shook her head, then pressed a finger to her lips. They listen. The next morning, I began to watch the staff. They moved like soldiers, calm, methodical, always in pairs. There was a routine. Breakfast, therapy, med checks, rest hour, lights out. I memorized the keys on their belts, the codes they typed, the names they whispered in passing. Every step, every glance, I stored like ammunition. In the therapy room, a kind-looking doctor named Green asked me why I thought I was someone named Elise. She was my safe place, I said softly, looking down. She was real. Not like this. He nodded. Took notes. Wrote something I couldn't see. Delusional persistence. Perfect. That night, I stole a paperclip from the staff lounge while pretending to refill my tea. I wrapped it in tissue and slid it into my waistband. During lights out, I faked sleep, waited for the corridor to go quiet, then padded barefoot into the hall. My heart was a hammer in my chest. I counted the turns. 1 left. 2 rights. Then, the stairs. A metal sign on the wall read, B3 restricted, Authorized staff, only I used the paperclip to jimmy the stairwell lock. Crude, but good enough. Roger taught me that once, how to pick a lock. He laughed when I asked him why he knew. Just in case I ever need to get out of somewhere I shouldn't be in, he'd said. Funny. Now it was me. The third floor was darker, quieter, colder. The walls were thicker. No windows. No cameras I could see. I followed the numbers painted faintly on the walls. Room 5. Room 6. Room 7. Then room 8. The door was matte black, sealed with a keypad. I tried 0317, the date from Catherine's file. Beep. Access denied. I tried 0718, my wedding date. Beep. Access denied. My hand shook. I was running out of time. Out of courage. Then I remembered Evelyn's birthday, Roger's mother. The only woman who ever tried to protect me. 9:12. Click. The lock disengaged. The door groaned open. Inside, it was dim. Cold. The air smelled like antiseptic and dust. And there, strapped to a bed, her wrists raw and her hair matted, was a woman. Catherine Dunlow. Her eyes flicked open. She stared at me. Elise, she rasped. My breath caught. You know me? They told me you were dead. I'm not, I whispered, rushing to her side. I'm here to get you out. Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to sit up, but the straps held her. He said I made everything up. That Roger wasn't real. That I invented him. You didn't. I'm his wife. He did the same to me. She laughed bitterly, the sound like broken glass. Then we're both ghosts. I pulled a small blade from my waistband stolen from the base of my toothbrush and began cutting her restraints. My fingers fumbled, my breath shallow. Can you walk? I asked. I haven't stood in months. But I'll try. She leaned on me, her legs trembling. We had to move fast. Alarms would come. Eyes would open. But if we could just reach the stairs, if we could get out before anyone noticed, BZZZT. The hallway lights flared. A voice over the speaker crackled. Unauthorized access in B3. Security dispatched. We had minutes. Maybe seconds. But I had Catherine. She was real. Alive. And I would not let her be buried again. The siren was deafening. My ears rang as the lights overhead flashed red, bathing everything in a pulsing glow. Catherine's frail arm was draped over my shoulder, her legs shaking beneath her, but her eyes were alive again. I can walk, she panted. Just get me out. I gripped her tighter and we moved. Slowly, urgently. My bare feet padded silently across the cold tile, every inch of me screaming with adrenaline. I peeked around the corner. The hallway was empty for now. This way, I whispered, guiding her toward the stairwell. But before we could reach it, I heard boots. Guards. Coming fast. We ducked into a dark utility room, maybe an old storage closet, and shut the door just before they passed. I held my breath as they thundered by, flashlights slicing through the shadows. Catherine slumped against the wall, gasping. They won't let us walk out of here, she said. They'll sedate us before we reach the exit. No, I said. We're not going through the front. There has to be another way. She closed her eyes. There is. What? Roger brought me in through the underground loading bay. I saw it once, during intake. It connects to a maintenance tunnel behind the laundry chute. That was something. Our only shot. We waited 10 more seconds, then slipped out and crept down the stairwell in the opposite direction of the guards. My body was shaking from fear and cold, but I refused to stop. Not now. Not when she was finally free. The laundry chute was hidden behind a locked linen room on level 2. I used the broken paperclip again, fingers fumbling, praying. The door creaked open. Inside, the chute gaped like a dark mouth. I'll go first, I whispered. Slide down behind me. I'll catch you. Catherine hesitated, then nodded. I dropped. Slammed into a pile of wet sheets below. Pain shot through my hip, but I was still breathing. I looked up just as she landed on top of me. We both groaned. But we were alive. The loading bay was just beyond a rusted gate. I pushed it open and found it dark, cavernous, and abandoned. Old pallets stacked high, the smell of oil thick in the air. In the corner, a locked service door. the last barrier between us and the outside world. And then, a voice behind us. "Well," he said calmly, "you were always clever, Elise." I froze. Catherine whimpered. Roger stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by 2 guards. But he wasn't Roger anymore. He was dressed in all black, his silver hair slicked back, his smile twisted into something cold and merciless. "Jonathan," I breathed. He clapped once. "Brilliant. The dying mother's files. The fake commitment. The journalist. Very theatrical." "Let her go," I said, stepping between him and Catherine. He chuckled. "And what are you going to do, Elise? Stab me with a paperclip?" "No," I said. "I'm going to bury you." I reached into my gown's waistband and pulled out Riley's backup burner phone, the one she'd slipped to me inside a bar of soap. I held it up. "Smile, Roger. You're live. The entire staff lounge is watching on a looped feed. Riley hacked their internal monitors 5 minutes ago." His smile faded. I showed him the red light blinking. "You just admitted it all." One of the guards shifted uneasily. The other stepped back. "You don't want to go down with him," I warned. "Walk away. Now." They hesitated, and then turned. Just like that, Roger was alone. I opened the service door and looked back one last time. "You erased me once. But now the whole world will remember what you are." "You won't make it far," he called out. "You'll be hunted." "I've been hunted before," I said, helping Catherine through the exit. "But I'm not the prey anymore." We disappeared into the night, 2 forgotten women stepping into the cold, open world. Granite Hollow was behind us. And in front of us, war. Catherine was trembling as we slipped into the dark woods behind Granite Hollow. Her feet bled through thin paper slippers, and my hands were raw from catching branches, but we didn't stop. Not until we saw the headlights. Riley was already there, waiting by the road in an old black sedan. The moment she saw us stumble out of the trees, she ran to meet us. Her face was pale with relief. "You did it," she whispered, gripping my arms. "You actually got her." "I told you," I said hoarsely. "He won't win this time." We drove in silence for miles until the forest gave way to winding roads and Catherine finally passed out in the back seat, her head resting against my shoulder. When Riley turned onto a hidden road behind an abandoned barn she had rented out for safety, I exhaled for the first time. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over. But it wasn't. It was just beginning. By dawn, Riley had uploaded the recorded footage from Roger's confrontation at Granite Hollow to a secure drive. She'd edited a clean version, Roger's voice, his confession, and the image of Catherine, strapped and broken. It was undeniable. She sent it to 5 major media contacts. Within hours, the emails bounced back. Blocked. Rejected. No longer accepting pitches. All of them. "Someone's already working to shut us down," Riley muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's covering his trail." That afternoon, the media struck first. The news outlets began running his version of the story. "Eccentric heiress escapes facility, claims wild conspiracy, delusional widow, manipulates journalist into defamation scheme, Jonathan Eckhart, victim of revenge plot by mentally unwell ex-wife." They used a photo of me from my fake commitment profile, the one labeled Elaine Maris. The world suddenly saw me through his eyes, not as a woman seeking truth, but as a mentally unstable fraud. Roger's machine was well-oiled. He had media contacts, legal teams, even former patients of the Silver Light Collective parroting his innocence. Riley stormed out of the room. I could hear her screaming into her phone. Meanwhile, Catherine sat across from me, hunched over, staring at her reflection in the barn's cracked mirror. "He made me into someone I didn't recognize," she whispered. "They told me I imagined everything." I started to believe it. I sat beside her. "That's what he does. He doesn't just erase you from the world. He makes you erase yourself." She nodded, her hands trembling. "But you came back. So will you." That night, Riley gathered us in the candlelit corner of the barn. "We have 2 choices," she said. "Wait for the world to believe us, or make them feel what he did." She pulled out her laptop and opened a video file, Evelyn Sterling's last recording. The one where Roger's mother admitted to everything, her voice ragged with guilt. It was the final piece. We stitched together the full story, Evelyn's testimony, my erased identity, the fake death certificates, Catherine's captivity, and Roger's live confession. Riley called it the woman time forgot. And this time, she didn't send it to newsrooms. She uploaded it directly to the internet, to forums, to private Discord groups, to whistleblower sites, to Reddit, to survivor communities. And within 12 hours, it had 1.4 million views. The tide began to turn. Women started writing in, I met Roger once. He told me I was broken. I stayed at his grief center. I wasn't allowed to call my family. He made me sign something. I didn't know what it was. He told me I didn't need my old name. Dozens. Then hundreds. And still, no arrest. No raid on Granite Hollow. No lawsuit filed against him. Because Roger had power. Money. Shields. But I had faces. And names. And truth. He called me. Late one night, just after the video passed 5 million views. Impressive, he said calmly. But very temporary. People love drama. They don't care about ghosts. Then I'll haunt you until your last breath, I said. You don't have the stamina, Elise. You erased me. But now the world knows I existed. You can't unwrite that. There was silence. Then a quiet laugh. I should have buried you deeper. Then he hung up. He wasn't just fighting to protect his empire. He was fighting to stay out of prison. And I knew deep down that he wasn't finished with me. Not yet. I never wanted to be famous. But overnight, I became a name the internet whispered in disbelief, sympathy, and sometimes mockery. The ghost wife. The crazy lady with a dead husband who isn't dead. The woman who said she was erased. The video Riley posted, The Woman Time Forgot, was viral now. But being seen didn't mean being believed. Some said I was brave. Others said I was mentally unwell. A few said I was lying for attention. And still, no arrest. Roger was untouched. Still Jonathan Eckhart. Still running Silver Light Collective. Still smiling in interviews like nothing had happened. Until one morning, I got a call from Nadia Rhodes, a broadcast journalist I admired, one of the few voices that still felt grounded in truth. I want to interview you, she said. Live. Prime time. One-on-one. We won't cut anything. But you have to be ready. If you stammer, if you look unwell, if you give them anything to doubt, you'll be eaten alive. I agreed. Not because I was ready, but because I had to be believed. The day of the interview, Riley helped me with makeup. Catherine sat silently beside me, squeezing my hand. You're not just speaking for you, she said. You're speaking for all of us. I wore a navy blue coat. Clean. Sharp. My hair brushed into soft curls. I looked like someone in control, even if my stomach was in knots. Riley looked at me once and said, if he's watching this, he's scared. Because you're not supposed to exist. That gave me strength. The studio lights were blinding. Nadia Rhodes sat across from me, her expression unreadable. The crew gave us the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Tonight, she began, we speak with Elise Sterling, once presumed dead, now very much alive. She claims her husband faked their marriage records, erased her identity, and locked other women away in hidden institutions. The man she accuses, Jonathan Eckhart, denies all charges. She turned to me. Elise, why should anyone believe you? I looked into the camera. Not at Nadia. Not at the audience. At every woman who'd ever been silenced. Because I have nothing left to lose by telling the truth. And he had everything to gain by making me disappear. Nadia was sharp, direct. She showed clips from Roger's foundation. She quoted the medical reports he'd faked about my delusions. She even played devil's advocate. Could this all be a misunderstanding? Could you be confused? No, I said softly. Because confused people don't carry proof. I handed her a copy of the marriage license Evelyn kept hidden. The footage of Catherine in room 8. Evelyn's dying confession. Nadia flipped through them slowly on camera. I'm not just a victim, I said. I'm the evidence. The segment lasted 27 minutes. When it ended, Nadia leaned closer. You just blew the roof off a very powerful man's kingdom. I nodded. Then she added, but he'll strike back. He did. Within hours, Roger posted a video online. He sat beside Camila, his voice trembling, wearing black, eyes puffy as if from tears. Elise is sick, he said. I loved her. I still love her. But I spent years watching her struggle with mental illness. She was institutionalized for her safety. Now she's manipulating other vulnerable women into believing conspiracy theories. He held up a photo of me, edited and gray-toned, with the words, "She needs help." Not a spotlight. The smear campaign reignited. #Justice for Jonathan trended on social media. One of Roger's doctors, probably paid, claimed I'd been treated for hallucinatory trauma. That I'd shown signs of narcissistic delusion. And worst of all, she's dangerous to herself and others. Then came the subpoena. Roger was suing me. For defamation. You knew this could happen, Riley said as we stared at the papers. He's using the legal system to bury you again. I nodded. Then let him. I'll show up to court with the one thing he never thought I'd have. What's that? I looked over at Catherine and the 3 new women who had come forward since the video, each of them ready to testify. Witnesses. The war wasn't just digital anymore. It was real. And I would not be erased again. The courthouse loomed like a cathedral of polished stone and cold silence. My feet echoed down the marbled hallway as I entered the courtroom, flanked by Riley and Catherine. Cameras flashed outside. Protesters stood behind barricades, half holding signs with "Believe Elise," the other half chanting "Justice for Jonathan." The air was thick with tension. Roger sat on the other side of the courtroom, calm and collected in a gray suit. His hair was perfect. His tie blood red. Camila sat beside him, holding his hand like a loyal wife, although she wasn't. Not officially. That was me. At least, it had been. He looked at me once. Just once. And smiled. My attorney was young and idealistic, Mara Dean, fresh off a major victory in a wrongful incarceration case. She believed me. She believed in truth. But belief didn't win court cases. Evidence did. The problem was, every piece of evidence we brought forward was met with a counter. Forged documents, paid testimonies, expert witnesses claiming I had emotional delusions stemming from trauma. One psychologist read aloud a fictional case Roger had planted years ago. She believed her husband had erased her life, but in fact, her social security records showed no marriage ever existed. I watched the jury blink in confusion. Truth was fragile. The worst came on day 3. Riley was scheduled to testify. She had been my sword, my shield, the one who got me out of Granite Hollow. But she never showed up. Instead, we got a call. Riley Monroe has withdrawn from the witness list. I stood outside the courtroom, shaking. Dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. On the 4th attempt, she finally answered. Riley, where are you? What's happening? Her voice was cracked. Hollow. Elise. I can't. I'm sorry. What did he promise you? I asked coldly. Silence. Then my sister. He found her. Paid her debt. She would have died, Elise. I didn't know he knew. I didn't think he'd. I hung up. Betrayal is a strange pain. It's not sharp. It's heavy. It crushes the lungs, the heart, the part of you that still believes in loyalty. Riley had been bought. Roger had found her weak spot and turned her into a blade. And I was bleeding. Catherine testified anyway. Her voice shook, her hands trembled, but her words were steady. He kept me drugged, she said. Told me I was someone else. That my family had forgotten me. He said no one would come. But Elise did. She came when no one else believed I existed. The courtroom fell silent. But Roger's lawyer quickly countered. And you remember all of this clearly? After how many years of supposed sedation? She remembers what he couldn't erase, I said from my seat. But even that sounded small. That night, I sat alone in my motel room and stared at my reflection. The woman in the mirror was not the wife she used to be. Not the erased ghost Roger tried to destroy. But she wasn't whole either. She was becoming. The next morning, court resumed. The final blow came when Roger submitted surprise evidence, a video clip, recently recovered from facility backups. It showed me at Granite Hollow, confused, shaking, yelling, "My name is Elise Sterling," while nurses restrained me. No context. No mention of why I was there. To the jury, it looked like a psychotic break. They gasped. One woman looked away. Another juror wiped a tear. Roger stared straight ahead, still smiling. After the session, Catherine met me in the hallway. "We'll lose," she said softly. "Not yet," I whispered. "How do you know?" "Because he thinks this is the end." I looked her in the eye. "But I still have one thing he doesn't." She waited. I smiled faintly. Truth that isn't scared. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, but purpose. Catherine was right. We were losing. Roger's team was relentless, and Riley's betrayal had shattered the credibility we'd spent months building. The media had started shifting back in his favor, spinning him into the image of a gentle man torn apart by his unstable former wife. But what Roger didn't know, what even I hadn't known until yesterday, was that he'd left a loose thread decades ago. And I had just found it. It started with an envelope. One Mara handed me, her voice trembling with hope. I dug through the original property records tied to Roger's earliest company, back when he was still Robert Grayson. "You told me he once mentioned a woman named Celine." I found her. The deed had two names: Robert Grayson and Celine Maris. My knees almost buckled. Maris. That was the last name Roger had forced onto me during the identity erasure, Elaine Maris. He'd reused it. From someone else. I whispered, "You think she was his first?" "I think she was his prototype." Tracking Celine down was like chasing fog until I found a public library volunteer list in Wyoming. There she was. Celine Maris. Age 71. Gray hair, soft eyes, and a face full of stories no one had ever asked to hear. I flew out the next morning. Catherine insisted on coming. When we found Celine in a quiet reading room surrounded by books, she looked at me like she already knew. "You're one of his, aren't you?" I sat down beside her. "I'm the one he couldn't erase." She nodded. "Then I guess it's time I stopped hiding." Celine had once loved Roger. Back when he was Robert. He'd promised her a life, a future, a child. But then came the manipulation, the gaslighting, the rewritten documents, the threats, the slow erosion of her finances, her name, her identity. "He didn't try to kill me," she said. "He just made the world forget I ever lived." I spent 2 years in a recovery center in Arizona until I clawed my way out. I've been off the grid since. "Why didn't you speak up?" "Because I thought I was alone." She looked at Catherine, then at me. "You proved I wasn't." Back in court, I watched Roger's smile falter for the first time when Mara stood and announced a surprise witness. "Your Honor," she said, "we call to the stand Celine Maris." The name struck him like a thunderclap. Roger turned in his seat, his knuckles whitening on the table. Celine entered slowly, a cane in hand, her shoulders straight, her eyes unafraid. I held my breath. "What is your connection to the defendant?" Mara asked. "I was his wife," Celine said, her voice clear. "Before he changed his name. Before Elise. Before any of this." "And what did he do to you?" She told everything. The fake medical records. The drugs. The withdrawal of her property rights. The staged psychotic episode. The secret facility. And finally, her escape. The jury listened in stunned silence. Mara handed Celine a stack of documents. "Are these the original deed and marriage license bearing both your names?" "Yes." "And do you recognize this man, Roger Sterling, as your former husband, Robert Grayson?" Celine stared at him, then said, "I recognize the eyes. But the man I married is long dead. What's left is a lie with a heartbeat." The courtroom erupted. Roger's lawyer objected, demanded verification. But the records were authentic. The timeline matched. The motive was undeniable. And Celine? She wasn't broken. She was bulletproof. That night, as we walked down the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. They asked if I felt vindicated, if I felt safe, if justice was near. I said one thing: this isn't just about me. It's about every woman who has ever rewritten Every woman told she was crazy when she was telling the truth. And behind me, Celine stood tall. Catherine held her hand. We were no longer ghosts. We were the reckoning. The day after Celine testified, the headlines changed. Second wife emerges against Roger Sterling, erased women unite. A pattern of abuse. Who is Jonathan Eckhart really? His mask had cracked. And the world was watching. Donors to the Silver Light Collective pulled funding overnight. The foundation's Instagram went dark. Their website vanished. Retreat centers across the country abruptly closed their doors, staff reallocation, the official reason. But we knew the truth. He was bleeding. And the empire was collapsing under its own lies. Mara received a call from the district attorney's office 2 days later. They were opening a criminal investigation. Fraud. Identity erasure. Medical manipulation. Unlawful imprisonment. But Roger still hadn't been arrested. Why? I asked Mara. She hesitated. Because someone's protecting him. That night, a letter arrived at the rented motel where Catherine, Celine, and I were staying. No stamp. No postmark. Just a handwritten note slid under the door. It was addressed to me. In shaking, familiar handwriting. Evelyn Sterling. Roger's mother. Long presumed dead. I opened it slowly, the paper yellowed and soft. Her voice echoed in every word. Elise, I don't know if this will reach you, but if it does, I want to tell you the truth I couldn't say when I was dying in that hospital bed. Roger wasn't always like this. He was born out of ruin. His father, my husband, ran a psychological trial program in the 1970s. He used real patients, real women, real trauma. He said he was helping them reclaim control. But it was control he wanted. Roger was just a boy when he saw it happen. One night, a patient escaped. She set fire to the facility. Half of them died. The scandal was buried. And I took Roger away. I thought I'd saved him. But he became his father. Only smarter. And I helped him at first. I told myself it was therapy. Until I met you. You were the first woman who didn't worship him. You loved him, but you saw him. And that scared him. That's when he started planning your erasure. Slowly. Quietly. He told me you were unstable. But I saw the lie. I should have stopped him. I didn't. Now you're the only one who can. Forgive me if you can. Evelyn and I sat with that letter pressed to my heart, the weight of generations sinking into me like ice. Roger hadn't just built his lies from nothing. He inherited them. He'd been shaped by cruelty. But he chose it. And now he would fall by it. Camila disappeared the next day. Not a word. Not a call. Her bank accounts drained. Her car abandoned outside the Silver Light Retreat Center in Colorado. Some said she ran. Some said she flipped. But I had a different feeling. Camila had been his weapon for years. A mask he wore. A voice he controlled. If she was missing, it was because he didn't need her anymore. Or she had become a threat. That night, I sat across from Catherine, Celine, and Mara in a dusty motel room lit by one flickering lamp. This isn't about survival anymore, I told them. It's about exposure. Every document. Every face. Every victim he tried to vanish. Mara leaned in. Then we need a press conference. One he can't silence. And where will we hold it? Celine asked. I looked down at Evelyn's letter. At the place where it began. Granite Hollow. Sealed off by authorities. Cold. Empty. But it still stood. And inside its walls were the ghosts of every woman Roger ever tried to forget. We arrived at Granite Hollow just after dusk. The gates were rusted open now, the electric lockbox gutted and stripped. The facility had been officially shut down pending investigation, but no tape lined the walls, no guards were posted. It was as if the state didn't know what to do with a building that had been built on lies. Catherine, Celine, Mara, and I stood beneath the tall, steel archway. No one spoke. The air was thick with memory. I stepped forward first, flashlight in hand. Every hallway we passed through echoed with footsteps I hadn't heard in weeks, but remembered in my bones. The sterile scent had faded, replaced now with mildew and dust. Some of the doors still bore numbers. Roommate's door had been removed. Just jagged hinges remained. It's like a mausoleum, Celine whispered. No, I said. A museum. Of the women he tried to erase. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning, right on the facility's front steps. We had invites sent to every outlet Roger had once silenced. This time, there would be no editing. No spin. Only truth. But I needed to see one last place before we left. The loading bay. The tunnel Catherine and I had used to escape. We took the service elevator down to the basement, but as we stepped off, something strange happened. The lights flickered on. Not motion sensors. Not backup power. Someone had turned them on. Mara looked at me. We're not alone. I moved toward the laundry corridor slowly, heart pounding. And there, leaning against the old chute door, was a figure. A woman. Her coat was dark. Her hair pulled back. Her eyes tired, but sharp. It was Camila. Alive. Waiting. You came, she said quietly. I didn't move. You vanished. They said you ran. I did. But not to escape him. She looked down. To escape myself. Catherine stepped forward, furious. You helped him. You were part of it. Camila didn't argue. She looked us all in the eye. Yes, I was. I helped manage the paperwork. I prepped the women for integration. I oversaw intake. I told myself I was helping them heal. That's what he called it. Healing. She touched her own chest, just over her heart. But I wasn't healing anyone. I was breaking them. Celine's voice cracked. Why are you here now? Camila's eyes met mine. Because he's preparing to flee. He has cash stashed in Belize. New IDs. He's trying to vanish before the DA finishes building the criminal case. And you're telling us this. Why? I asked. Because I found something. Something even you don't have. She pulled a small black drive from her pocket. It's the master log. Digital. Records of every woman admitted. Every transfer. Every false report. Including the ones he deleted. She held it out to me. It proves everything. I took it with shaking hands. What do you want in return? Camila looked around Granite Hollow's rotten walls. Nothing. I just want to sleep again. We left her standing in the dark, a woman who once played warden now haunted by the prison she helped build. I didn't forgive her, not yet. But I didn't stop her either. She didn't follow us. She had nowhere left to go. That night, I sat with the drive clutched in my lap. Inside were the names of 71 women. 71 ghosts. 71 lives Roger had tried to erase. Tomorrow, the world would hear them all. The press gathered at Granite Hollow just before noon. News vans lined the overgrown driveway, their antennas piercing the sky like nervous fingers. Cameramen adjusted their tripods. Journalists checked their notes. Even independent streamers showed up, phones in hand, live feeds already rolling. Mara stood beside me, dressed in charcoal gray, calm as stone. Celine and Catherine stayed close. We had the flash drive ready. The master log Camila gave us. It would all be aired, downloaded, archived. Undeniable. I took my place at the podium in front of Granite Hollow's sealed doors. This was it. I looked out at the crowd, at the blinking red lights of cameras. Then I said, my name is Elise Sterling. I was erased. But I am not gone. And I'm not the only one. A hush fell over the crowd. I continued. I stand here with proof, names, dates, confessions of what Jonathan Eckhart did to women like me. Like Catherine. Like Celine. Like 71 others at least. Mara stepped forward and held up the flash drive. This contains intake logs, false psych records, identity swaps, and internal videos. We're giving it to the state and releasing it to the public immediately. Flashes burst from cameras. Murmurs swelled. But before I could finish, I heard the screech of tires. A black luxury SUV slammed to a stop at the base of the driveway. And out stepped Roger. Dressed in crisp navy. Calm. No security. Just a handheld mic. He walked through the crowd like he still owned it. Some of the reporters turned to him. Some followed. Roger took a separate mic from a stunned journalist and stood no more than 10 feet from me. Before you let her spin this into a drama, he said, his voice polished, let me ask just one question. He turned to the crowd. Where's the original marriage license she claims I erased? I opened my mouth, but he raised his hand. And if I'm the villain she claims, why didn't she report me when she escaped? Why wait until a documentary? She was institutionalized, Mara snapped. You had her declared delusional. Roger smiled faintly. A delusion she's still living in. He looked at the cameras again. Ladies and gentlemen, she believes this happened. But that doesn't make it real. He stepped closer to me, eyes sharp. Tell them about Riley. About how your own ally abandoned you. I stood still. He was trying to fracture everything. Publicly. Loudly. So both sides would seem untrustworthy. So the public would walk away, bored or confused. Tell them how Catherine was ruled incompetent just last year, he pressed. How Celine vanished for 40 years. Ask yourselves, is this credible? Or is this theater? The crowd was shifting. Some believed him. Some didn't. But too many were uncertain. And then, Roger turned to me with a final blow. Tell them about the deal I offered you this morning. How I said I'd give you the money, your name, a quiet life, if you just walked away. Gasps. Mara looked at me stunned. Because that was true. He had offered it. A final bribe. Everything I'd lost returned. I stepped forward, raised the mic again. And I looked straight at him. Yes. He offered me all of it. Money. My records. Even a new identity. Another murmur in the crowd. But here's what he didn't count on. I turned to the cameras, voice rising. I don't want a new identity. I want the one he tried to kill. I held up the flash drive. This is who I am. This is who he is. And this is the proof. I tossed the drive to a journalist in the front row. Upload it. All of it. Now. She caught it. Plugged it into her tablet. The screen lit up behind us, projected from a cruise rig. One by one, names appeared. Faces. Intake logs. Video clips. Evelyn's confession. Celine's signatures. Catherine's footage from room 8. All of it. Undeniable. Live. Roger didn't move. The crowd turned on him. For the first time, he had no words. He tried to leave. But 2 state troopers arrived before he could reach his car. They didn't say a word. They just put him in cuffs. The flashbulbs exploded. The roar rose. But I stood in silence, heart pounding, eyes locked on the man who stole 30 years of my life. And finally, he looked back. Not with rage. Not with victory. But with something he'd never shown me before. Fear. The courtroom felt colder this time. Not because of the air conditioning, but because this wasn't my trial anymore. It was Roger's. And for the first time, he wasn't seated beside a team of polished lawyers whispering strategy. He sat alone, hands cuffed, jaw tight, a court-appointed defense attorney flipping through paperwork beside him like she didn't quite believe the case she'd inherited. The state's charges against him were monumental: medical fraud, identity tampering, unlawful imprisonment, financial conspiracy, psychological abuse. And for each charge, I was the face. But now I wasn't just testifying. I was witnessing. And I wasn't prepared for what came next. The prosecution presented their evidence first. Camila's digital logs. Evelyn's letter. Catherine and Celine's sworn statements. The footage of room 8. Even Riley, once silent, had sent in a written deposition to avoid testifying in person. Piece by piece, the illusion Roger had built was stripped away. But the real twist came when the defense stood. Your Honor, the woman began. We called to the stand someone who knew Mrs. Elise Sterling long before any of this began. Someone who can speak not just to the defendant's history, but hers. She turned toward the benches. And that's when I saw her. June Alder. My former friend. My maid of honor. The last person I expected. She hadn't spoken to me in almost 2 decades. After the wedding, we drifted apart. Or rather, I was pushed away. Roger had told me she grew jealous, that she lied too often, that she liked attention. So I cut her out. And now here she was, testifying for his defense. What can you tell us about Elise Sterling? The lawyer asked. June's voice was cool. Polished. She was emotional. Brilliant, yes. But volatile. I remember one time, she swore Roger was following her, reading her journal. She said her phone was being tapped. When was this? 2 years after their wedding. And did you believe her? June hesitated. At first, yes. But over time, no. She changed. She became withdrawn. Suspicious. Said people were plotting against her. I stared at her, my hands trembling. She was describing exactly what happened, but painted as paranoia. The trap was clear. They weren't trying to prove Roger's innocence. They were trying to cast doubt on my sanity. When Mara cross-examined, she leaned in carefully. Miss Alder, were you aware that during this time, Mr. Sterling had begun altering Mrs. Sterling's medical records behind her back? No. Did you ever speak to Elise after 2004? No. So your last memory of her was from a time when she was being psychologically manipulated by the defendant, but you didn't know that? I suppose. Thank you. No further questions. But the damage was done. Doubt had been planted. And in the court of public opinion, doubt was a poison. Later that evening, I stood outside the courthouse as reporters buzzed and microphones were thrust toward me. Mrs. Sterling, do you have any comment on June Alder's statement? I looked into the lens of one camera. My voice was calm. Yes, I was paranoid. I was suspicious. I was terrified. But I wasn't wrong. What June described wasn't delusion, it was survival. Women aren't unstable for sensing danger. We're just often ignored until it's too late. That night, I went back to the motel and opened a box I hadn't touched in years, old letters from June, wedding photos, a dried corsage she once made for me. I had loved her, trusted her, and Roger had stolen that from me too. Not by violence, but by isolation. He hadn't just erased me from the world. He'd erased the world from me. And I wasn't done reclaiming it. It started with a message on a quiet Wednesday morning. A woman named Lorraine Bexley, 68, from Missouri, emailed Mara's office with a subject line that read, "He called me Julia for 4 years." Attached were scanned documents, birth certificates, property transfers, and most importantly, photos of Lorraine inside a facility, wearing a name tag that said Julia Ayres. When I saw her face, I froze. Not because I recognized her, but because I didn't. And that was the point. Roger hadn't just targeted me, or Celine, or Catherine, or even Camila. He had created a system, an assembly line, where identity wasn't just erased, it was reassigned. We arranged a secure flight and brought Lorraine to the city by Friday. She was nervous, thin, her voice brittle like porcelain. But her memories? Unshakable. She remembered a small, off-grid facility in Montana. A woman named Elaine Maris, with a British accent. A nurse named Camila. And once, she remembered seeing Roger's face. He called himself Dr. Julian Marks, she told us, hands shaking. But it was him. I'd never forget those eyes. She had a scar across her back, from a restraint belt. She still had the hospital ID badge she'd slipped into her sock before escaping. And she had something no one else had ever found, an original intake log handwritten by Roger. His signature. His handwriting. His words. The prosecution nearly dropped their coffee when we showed them. "This is a smoking gun," the ADA whispered. "Where did she get this?" "She took it the night she ran," I said. "She kept it in a freezer bag for 17 years. They brought her in to testify the next day. Courtroom packed. Cameras outside. Roger visibly paled when he saw her. She didn't look at him. She looked at the jury. "I was Lorraine Bexley," she began. "But for 4 years, they made me be Julia. My family thought I died in a car crash. They held a funeral. And I was locked in a room in Montana." She passed the log to the bailiff. When the defense objected, the judge overruled. The jury passed it around, sheet by sheet. Roger's handwriting. His notes. His signature. One section read, "Subject renamed Julia Ayres. Claimed to be Lorraine Bexley. Memory confusion worsening. Family closure confirmed. Proceed with full identity integration." Gasps echoed. One juror covered their mouth. The truth was in ink. After Lorraine stepped down, I asked the judge for permission to address the court, not as a witness, but as a survivor. He allowed it. I stood, my voice calm but firm. I was told I was no one, that I had no name, no past. No truth. But I am not the only one. This courtroom is not filled with one victim. It is filled with many. Some in these seats. Some watching from hospital rooms. Some watching from shelters. And some still trying to remember their real names. I looked Roger in the eye. You didn't just erase our lives. You rewrote them. But your story is over. The courtroom burst into silent tears. Even Mara's hands were trembling as she sat beside me. Roger didn't speak. He didn't move. For once, he was silent. Outside, reporters swarmed Lorraine as she left the building. Her first words were, "I remember who I am now. And no one will ever call me Julia again." I should have felt victorious. Lorraine's testimony shattered what was left of Roger's defense. His lawyer barely cross-examined her. The prosecution was already drafting final arguments. The media now called him a calculated predator and architect of erasure. But that night, something itched in my mind. A name. Something Lorraine had said in passing before her testimony, almost like an afterthought. He told the staff I was being funded by the Trinity Cascade Trust. Said it was a special therapy fund he'd set up. I had never heard of that. Neither had Catherine. Or Celine. Or Camila. But Mara? Mara paled when she heard it. She turned to her laptop instantly. "Trinity Cascade isn't a therapy fund," she whispered. "It's a shell company. It's been funneling money out of the Silverlight Foundation for years. By morning, we had traced over $4 million moving through Trinity Cascade's account into scattered investments in Belize, Malta, and one small property in Morocco. And then we found the kicker, an active private jet reservation. 2 days from now. Filed under an alias Roger had once used, Julian Marks. He wasn't done. He was waiting. Watching the court. Pretending to comply. But the moment the jury deliberated, he would disappear again. New name. New passport. New lie. We rushed the information to the district attorney. They were furious. How the hell did he manage this from jail? One investigator barked. Camila answered calmly, because he doesn't need a phone. He built a web of proxies. Lawyers, fake trustees, paid agents. I know the man. He always plans his escape before the trap even tightens. The DA filed for pre-conviction detainment with high security. But the judge hadn't approved it yet. That gave us 2 days. 2 days before Roger tried to vanish again, maybe forever. And I wasn't going to let that happen. That night, I did something reckless. I visited him. Not in private, but in holding. In front of a guard. I sat across the glass. He looked up, slow and smug, as if I had walked into his home. "Still pretending this ends with bars?" he asked. I stared back. "No. This ends with a name." He tilted his head. "Yours or mine?" I leaned forward, voice steady. "Trinity Cascade." His eyes flickered. Just for a second. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. But I saw it, recognition. I smiled. "I know everything now. The wire transfers. The land in Fez. The pilot license you paid for 3 years ago." Roger leaned forward slowly. "You're brave," he whispered. "No," I said. "I'm free." He smirked. "You'll never understand this," he said. "But you weren't the first, Elise. You were just the last one who fought back." He stood, hands cuffed. "I built the perfect lie. And you just pulled back the curtain." The guard stepped in. Roger gave one last look. Then said, quietly, "Enjoy your truth. It won't save you when the lights go out." I walked away calm. But inside? I knew. The lights were about to go out somewhere. And I had 2 days to burn every lie he ever built to the ground. The offices of Trinity Cascade sat at the top of a glass tower in Manhattan. No signs. No receptionist. Just a frosted glass door with a small silver plaque, TC Holdings, LLC. Camila, Mara, and I arrived under assumed names, posing as potential partners for a wellness retreat franchise. It was a lie, but then again, so was everything this place had ever built. Inside, we found marble floors, cold light, and a secretary who barely looked up from her desk. "We're here to meet with Mr. Lane," Mara said. The secretary tapped on a keyboard, then nodded. "Suite 4107. That was the name on the jet charter booking, Brandon Lane. But there was no Brandon Lane. It was Roger. Another mask. When we entered Suite 4107, we didn't find a man in a suit. We found files, cabinets, a server bank, and one woman, mid-50s, neat bun, glasses, and a face I recognized instantly. Paula Desmond, Roger's former accountant. The woman who used to send me Christmas cards before she quit and vanished. She froze when she saw me. Elise? I stepped forward. You helped him move the money. You knew what he was doing. Her face didn't flinch, but her hands trembled. I didn't know at first, she said softly. At the beginning, it was just numbers. Transfers. Tax shelters. Then the names changed. Identities. And women started disappearing. Why didn't you stop? She looked me dead in the eye. Because I thought you were dead. My heart cracked. That made it easier? No, she whispered. That made it justified. If you were dead, then at least you couldn't suffer. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, open the server. She hesitated. But then, she did. What we saw made my knees go weak. Not just financial logs, but videos. Surveillance from multiple retreats. Women being interviewed. Drugged. Documents being signed under sedation. Identities reassigned. There were folders labeled by aliases: Elaine Maris, Julia Ayres, Carla Bloom. And one folder simply called Exit. Mara clicked it open. Inside, the Belize passport under the name Julian Marks. A lease agreement for a house in Tanger. A prepaid satellite phone with encrypted contact lists. And worst of all, a copy of my forged death certificate. Dated for this week. Camila stepped back, stunned. He was going to disappear again. And make it look like you died twice. Mara turned to Paula. We need to copy this. All of it. Paula nodded and handed over the hard drive. Elise, she said quietly. He has one more person on the inside. I froze. What do you mean? There's someone you trust. Deeply. Someone he flipped long ago. Paid in silence. He called them his final guarantee. Said if all else failed, they'd stall you. Or stop you. I shook my head. Riley's already out. Paula's eyes were glassy. It wasn't Riley. That night, back at the motel, we pored over the files. Mara went to call the DA. Camila sat by the window silent. I walked to the table and pulled out my old, worn photo album. I'd been keeping it as a reminder of who I was before Roger's erasure. And that's when I saw it. A tiny note slipped between 2 pages. A handwritten line in familiar, looping cursive. I kept you safe as long as I could. But he found me. I'm sorry. It was signed, Catherine. The world tilted. Not her. Not Catherine. The woman I rescued. The woman I fed when she couldn't lift a spoon. The woman who called me her sister in survival. She was his final guarantee. And suddenly, I remembered. The night we stopped at that rest station and she lost her phone. The time she insisted we skip a courthouse filing, just for a day. The stories she never quite finished telling. I felt sick. I stood from the bed slowly. Camila looked up. What is it? I held out the note. She was never just a victim. I didn't sleep. I waited. I sat by the door of the motel room all night, clutching Catherine's note like a blade that had already cut too deep to scream. At 5:42 a.m., I heard the rustle of keys. She stepped in quietly, a paper coffee cup in one hand, her cardigan pulled tight around her. Her face froze the moment she saw me. I was going to tell you, she whispered. Tell me what? My voice cracked. That you were his final guarantee? That you stalled the court filing? Lied to Mara? That you watched me fight for your life while you were guarding his? Her hand shook. The coffee cup slipped and hit the floor. I didn't do it to protect him, she said. I did it to protect her. Who? Catherine slowly sat down on the edge of the bed. Her eyes welled, her lips trembling. My daughter. My pulse stopped. What? I had a daughter, Elise. Before Granite Hollow. Before the facilities. Before Roger. Her name was Hope. She pulled out a faded photo from her coat pocket. A little girl with auburn hair and wide, startled eyes. She was 2 when I was taken. I screamed for her. Begged them not to separate us. They said she'd be placed with a friend of the foundation. I didn't understand what that meant until I woke up, and she was gone. I stared, breathless. Roger placed her? I asked. Catherine nodded. He said he was giving her a better life. But he kept her close. Hidden. Somewhere within the retreats. Said if I ever spoke out, ever disobeyed, she'd disappear forever. I didn't even know where until last year. Her hands dug into her coat. She's alive, Elise. Her name isn't Hope anymore. It's Mira. Roger renamed her, raised her in the Silver Light system. She thinks he saved her. Thinks I abandoned her. That's why I stayed close. That's why I stalled things. My voice trembled. You lied to protect her. I lied to find her, Catherine whispered. I never meant to betray you. But when Roger realized you'd become a threat again, he reminded me. He showed me a photo. Said if I didn't slow you down, Mira would be sent overseas. Vanished. Just like he vanished you. The rage in me cracked, then gave way to something deeper. Something sadder. Because I knew what it meant to live in fear of vanishing. I wish you'd told me, I whispered. I couldn't. You should've. I know. We sat in silence. Then I said, we're going to get her back. Catherine's eyes snapped up. You mean it? She's not just your daughter. She's proof. Of his control. Of his manipulation. She's the piece the jury doesn't have. She won't testify. She doesn't know what he is. Then we show her, I said. Gently. Carefully. But we show her the truth. Camila stepped into the room minutes later. We told her everything. She didn't hesitate. We'll find Mira. Today. By noon, we had a name. A school. A guardian listed as Ms. Karen DeLorme, one of Roger's longtime associates. We waited until the last bell rang. And when Mira stepped outside the private arts academy, wearing a Silver Light uniform and carrying a violin case, Catherine collapsed into sobs beside me. She looks just like her father, she whispered. But she deserves to look like her mother, I said. It's time. We approached carefully. Gently. Myra's eyes narrowed at Catherine at first. But then Catherine said something no one else could have known. You were allergic to peaches. You used to suck on the pit anyway, just to feel the cold. Mira blinked. Her lips parted. And someone began to remember. Before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. My name is Elise Sterling. For 30 years, I was erased. Gaslight. Drugged. Locked away. Made to believe that my memories were madness. That my name had no record. That my love had never existed. But I survived. I fought. And today, I won. It happened on the final day of trial. The courtroom was full. The jury pale and quiet. Reporters silent, cameras ready. The prosecutor stood and made one last motion. Your Honor, we request to call a final witness. She is not a victim, not a plaintiff, but she is the living result of the defendant's control. The name was spoken. Mira Alder. She walked in slowly, eyes wide but unafraid. Catherine sat behind her, weeping into her hands. Mira sat at the witness chair and faced the court. She spoke clearly. My name used to be Hope. I didn't know that until 4 days ago. I was raised in a system that made me feel lucky. Special. Saved. But it wasn't salvation. It was silence. I was told my mother abandoned me. That she was unstable. But she never abandoned me. She was stolen from me. And now I know the man who told me lies was the same man who locked her away. Her voice broke. But then she said, I remember my mother's voice. I didn't know it was hers. But I remember it sang me to sleep from behind the mirror in the visitor room. That was her. And I want the world to know. I remember her now. The jury cried. The judge cried. Even Mara, fierce, steady Mara, wiped her eyes. Roger sat stone-faced. For once, his hands didn't twitch. His mouth didn't move. Because he knew it was over. He had erased dozens. But one remembered. And that was all it took. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all 19 counts. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms, no parole. The Silver Light Foundation was dissolved. Its assets repurposed to fund trauma recovery centers across the country. One of them would bear Celine's name. Another, mine. Weeks later, I sat in a quiet room, a camera facing me. A producer asked, What do you want people to remember, Elise? I looked directly into the lens. I want them to remember what was done. And what was endured. I want them to remember that erasure isn't always a sudden act. Sometimes it's slow, gentle, disguised as care. And by the time you realize it's happening, you've already disappeared. But I came back. With my name, my story, my truth. And I'm not the only one. Catherine now lives near Mira. They meet every Sunday for coffee and truth. Celine volunteers at a women's shelter. Camila testifies for women still trying to escape spiritual control. And me? I write. I speak. I remember. Because the woman time forgot now owns her time. And I will never, never be forgotten again. Thank you for joining Elise's journey. If her story moved you, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers and Wills. What would you have done in Elise's place? Have you ever felt erased, silenced, or doubted? Let's talk. Let's remember. And most of all, let's rise.